So Ascendance of a Bookworm Season 3 has officially arrived. Truthfully, one of my more anticipated sequels coming back here, mainly because it's one of those shows that has always impressed me from basically minute one. Originally, when Season 1 was airing, I was like, oh, I don't see what people are seeing in this one, and then eventually I caught up, saw what the buzz was about. But the idea of having what you could argue as a slow burn kind of fantasy isekai show where a character is now in another character's body, new life, things like that. But the idea of simply taking that slow burn modern mentality and implementing it into a much more medieval pre-modern world, so the idea of printing presses and books and things like that, it's something that should be one of the most boring concepts in my humble opinion. Yet somehow Bookworm, despite not having all that much excitement in a general scene, it's usually just Myne sitting there planning how to make her business better than it currently is. But I think the thing that always sold me on it is that Myne was just the bundle of adorableness. That, the idea of having this frail girl who can't do much by herself has this amazing mind that could revolutionize their world, but needs so much assistance. So building up all those different connections of people who sometimes you want to bash their skulls in because they're just that arrogant, to having some of the most adorable family dynamics that anime has seen in the past decade. There's just something about Bookworm that everything about it technically should be boring, yet I always walk in and out of an episode feeling like it's been 2 minutes, and somehow that 20-minute episode that in any other director studio's hands would be the most boring shit ever. And I think having this episode, for the most part, being pretty calm, despite it ending and having arguably one of the bigger threats that Myne's had to deal with. The Ink Guild doesn't seem like they're up to any good. I have a feeling her being at the cathedral and things like that isn't actually going to protect her all that much, though it does seem like her father's going to be on guard duty, saying kind of like, screw the government, I'm going to protect my girl no matter what. But even though there's all that dramaticness, most of the episode was just setting up the next stage of the bookmaking. The idea of kind of elevating the printing press and having someone who I think was established in Season 2. I'm not sure if he was in Season 1 or not, but the idea of someone who, personality that rubs people the wrong way. He's very peculiar, he needs everything to be done a very certain, clever, clean way. And most people just don't see the point in being like that. But for Myne, someone who needs to make basically metal blocks so that she can print and mass produce her books and things like that, it actually is a recipe for success. And, one of the things that I always like about something like this, which it's not like Bookworm's the first to do it, but Bookworm's one of the stronger series to use this concept. Someone has a modern mentality, now is in a premature state of society. Someone who can create books in different types of inks and things like that. You basically have an established world and a hierarchy. If some child comes in and basically messes with the status quo, there's a very good chance that the people who's been making a lot of money being the monopoly in town of how to make ink and things like that, they're not going to like it. Because if you sell it cheaper, or even if you sell it for a more expensive margarine, if your quality is better or there's more options, you don't hold that monopoly, right? So the idea of simply kind of selling things to them and in theory things should be okay, but the fact that they're targeting a little girl, going after her friends, going after this and that, the fact that someone who's already going to be away from home for her entire winter now had to go early because there's these adult scumbags who are taking bribes from people and clearly are going to try to kidnap her, potentially kill her, things like that. It's just not good. It's not looking up for Myne. And in terms of being a dramatic return, they actually kicked it off in one of the more exciting ways. No playtime. There's no kind of easing you in, here's a recap what happened in Season 2. No, it just immediately assumes you know what's happening. And Bookworm's one of those shows that even if you don't rewatch before it comes back, it's actually pretty easy to get reacquainted with the characters, what's currently going on, because the main hook is she wants to make books. She wants to basically have a library and just have all the wondrous things that she no longer can have in her life, as she simultaneously has to work with the church and things like that because of her abilities and things and whatnot. But it's absolutely hilarious to see just how easily they can remind you of certain dynamics. Like Benno and Myne, I forgot just their arguing, their bickering, their back and forth, that moment where, that guy's basically like, oh, you're a great dad, actually. You really think I would be, the daughter of him? Do you really think she would be the daughter of me? Just seeing them bicker back and forth, they're so similar, but they continue to think that they're so much better than the other, and that the other is more of a troublemaker than themselves. But the reason that they clash and butt heads so much is that they're too similar and too close to comfort to one another. And that's what makes them both the best and worst business partners imaginable. And it could just be because I haven't rewatched season 2 since it concluded. But to me, it does feel like what we saw with this first episode, it felt a bit more higher in quality and production value than what season 2 delivered. Not that season 2 was bad or anything, but I don't look at Bookworm as being one of the sharpest and cleanest detail shows in any season, right? I look at it as a very solid production. It does what it needs to. The voice actors carry it usually more than the actual presentation. But there's something about this episode, despite not having anything truly that remarkable of like a Sakuga fest or anything like that. It was just more so looking at the world, the number of background shots. I felt like perspective was utilized a lot better in this episode, just with buildings and general landscapes, and just to see how nothing felt like it dipped at all, where in previous episodes of Bookworm, I feel like you can pick apart. Sure, the first episodes are usually the ones that are the most highly polished, because you're just starting your production, you put everything in all your resources in the first episode to make sure people want to stick with it. But it just kind of feels like Bookworm Season 3 kicked off in a more polished way than what seasons 2 or 1 did. And that could just be recency bias where, because I haven't rewatched the older episodes in recent memory, so maybe it actually is pretty much consistent with how it always looks, which of course it has the general art style, the general animation. But I don't know, just the way the colors were blended, the lighting, the perspectives, especially with the landscapes, it just felt to me like this episode was higher quality overall. And either way, I imagine we're getting a one-core season. And if that's the case, I feel like that type of quality will remain consistent, especially if it's going to be between 10 and 13 episodes like I imagine it will be. As far as I'm aware, there hasn't been an official announcement yet, but I imagine that's where it's going to end up. Bookworm's one of those shows that I don't have to talk about on the channel. I easily could ignore it, even though it does have a dedicated fan base. It's one of those shows that a lot of channels don't cover because it's a show that I think sometimes it's harder to talk about because it on paper doesn't have as much things happening on screen, but it just has so much character, it's hard not to enjoy watching it. But it's one of those shows that I continue to talk about because it's something that makes me happy. Luckily, it's airing on a Monday, not going to be talking about anything else on Mondays anyway, so it makes it a lot easier than if it was going to air on a Friday or a Saturday, because those 2 days are already packed enough as is. But I love Bookworm. I think the characters are great. I think they continue to flesh out the cast in a genuine way. The new opening and ending songs, absolutely fantastic. Love the visuals, love the song. Just overall, Bookworm just came back with a bang. It establishes arguably the most dangerous threat you could establish. Basically an ink guild who doesn't like a girl who's kind of messed with the market of profits. Very well could have a hit on her head after she exposes her secrets. I mean, there's a very good chance that they might try to kill this girl. And if so, the father's going to have to, break some skulls, but even then, he could get killed, right? There's actually a dangerous threat, despite having arguably a very comfy atmosphere for 90% of it. And that's what makes Bookworm such a roller coaster. It can be a very simple, almost slice-of-life daily adventures of a deathly ill girl who's just trying to make a book, or it can end up having a church and the government and a merchants guild coming after her because she's rocking the boat. And the status quo is no longer going to be acceptable. But thoughts if you have any on the return, whether if you love the source material or if you're an anime original, let me know down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new around here. Till next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.